So thank you everyone joining today's program on behalf of Sri Aurobindo Yoga Foundation. I welcome all of you. As you know, today's topic is Gita Yoga and Integral Yoga. Uh, and as we all know, Gita is a voice of Lord and so is Integral Yoga. There has been numerous discourses, but nonetheless, being a Lord as a nature infinite, their interpretations could be infinite. So today, without much ado, let's hear from Dr. Ananda Reddy, who's a scholar, teacher. So we are very much interested to listen from you, Dr. Reddy. Here you go, please.
Well, namaskar. I think it's a wonderful way to greet you with namaskar because you are in the morning session and I am in the night session. But in English, I have to say good morning or good evening or good night. But I think Indian style of saying namaskar applies to all the 24 hours. Anytime I can tell you namaskar wherever you are. So that suits us very well. And this is typically the Indian stance, the integration, the totality. We don't break time into pieces and say morning, afternoon, good afternoon. However, I'm happy to be with you again, maybe the second time this year, or I don't know, I forget the last time when I came, but I'm happy, Vivek, to be once again with you. And when I see the photographs in your house, I remember my visit to your place, the beautiful mother's chair in there, and the mother's presence. And I remember the beautiful house you have there. So once again, welcome to this session on the Gita Yoga and Integral Yoga. You may be wondering why I chose this topic. That's because you see, sometimes people think that Gita Yoga and Integral Yoga they're pretty much similar and very close to each other. Well, apparently it is so because we have the three main parts of the Gita: the Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga. And in Sri Aurobindo's the synthesis of yoga, which is the essence of Integral Yoga. We have got these three main books: the Yoga of Divine Works, the Yoga of Divine Integral Knowledge, the Yoga of Divine Love. So thinking that these are similar, Bhakti Yoga and the Divine Love, and Karma Yoga and Integral Knowledge, and Karma and Jnana Yoga with integral knowledge, etc. You see a kind of parallelism and you say, oh my God, synthesis of yoga is very close to Gita Yoga, and maybe synthesis Integral Yoga is more or less a combination of the Gita Yoga. But it is to take out kind of a misunderstanding that I chose this topic. Well, in the given 1 hour, I can't do much. But just to give you a little highlight, a few highlights on three main sections. One is the similarities between the Bhagavad Gita and Integral Yoga. The second part is the differences between Bhagavad Gita and Integral Yoga. And thirdly, the oneness, the identity between Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo. So let's take up the first one, which is apparently the easy one, and many people may find lots and lots of similarities. I do not doubt that. But such a topic would really take us to almost 8 to 10 talks. But I know Vivek has a very busy schedule this year. He'll not allow me so many talks. So I'll try to put it into one little talk with a 45 to 50 minutes of time given. Not to hit the nail on the head right away. What is the last word of the Gita? Well, I wish I had taken a class so I could take your responses. But the last word of the Gita, I'm sure all of you have gone through, most of you have, I know, even when I was there with in America years back, I'd given talks in the Gita. So I know all of you are well versed. So my question is, what is the last word of the Gita? Well, it's easy in a way. The Lord says, Sri Krishna says, Mamekam Sharanam Raja. That's the last word. I mean, have you spoken for about 685 verses? One last verse in chapter 18, verse number 65, when it says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Raja. So that is the last word. If that is so, what's the last word of integral yoga? I'm sure you know all that. It's just that simple thing. Mother, Sri Aurobindo is my refuge. You see the same word, Sharanam and refuge. Here, Mother herself has written this mantra. Mother, Sri Aurobindo is my refuge. So isn't it wonderful to see both Gita and Integral Yoga have given the same mantra. Mamekam Sharanam Raja, take shelter in me alone. And Mother Sri Aurobindo is my refuge. So this is the first and the foremost similarity between the Gita and Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Now coming to a next point. What are the central tenets of the Bhagavad Gita? Well, it is difficult to say, and at the same time, it is easy. Each one of us can find different verses. But for me, I found one verse in chapter 2, verse number 48. Can you take out this meeting? Yeah, one verse, chapter 2, verse number 48. Fixed in yoga, do thy actions. Having abandoned attachment, having become equal in failure and success, for it is equality that is meant by yoga. So, what is the message? That fixed in yoga, do the action. So, the emphasis is on doing your actions, but not just for the actions for the sake of action, but it says fixed in yoga. Fixed in yoga means fixed in union with the divine within. So action per se has no value. So the Gita would say, you must be fixed. Yoga means union. You must be united with me within, says the Lord. And then on the outer level, do your action. And when you're doing action, what is the attitude? Having abandoned attachment. So union with the divine within. Second would be abandoning the attachment. And third, having become equal in failure and success. Third quality is equality. Because these are the three things: union with the divine, no attachment with the work, and then equality. These are the three aims, if I can put it in simple words. This is where we see in Aurobindonian language, I'll come to that later, but just to tell you at this stage, this could be what we say aspiration in integral yoga or Shravandas yoga. This goes along with what is aspiration in Gita, is to aspire to do action in the world, having established a contact within. Now, the second one, threefold are the doors of hell, destructive of the soul: desire, wrath, and greed. Therefore, let man renounce these three. This is very simple, but at the same time, Sri Krishna uses very strong words. He says, threefold are the doors of hell. What are these doors? Desire, wrath, and greed. So the human beings go to hell because of these three qualities. That is desire, wrath, and greed. And of course, in another verse, the same chapter, but later on, verses 62 and 63, he tells us very logically, psychologically, and in fact, as all of you know, I find the Bhagavad Gita basically a psychological study, a psychological approach. I mean, it is such a beautiful, close psychological analysis of the human being, human behavior, human nature, human destiny, that I think psychologists should take it up as the really, long back in the Western world, there is Jung and Freud and all that. But I don't understand why Indians are really fighting shy to take up Sri Krishna's Bhagavad Gita as a psychological study. It combines human nature, it gives you human destiny, it combines what's to be conquered and how to read the patient, etc. However, that's not my business, but I really feel, you see here, simple thing where Sri Krishna says, abandon attachment. He says, in him whose mind dwells on the objects of sense with absorbing interest, attachment to them is formed. From attachment arises desire. From desire, anger comes forth. You see the logical connection? First, there's a question of senses. That when the mind dwells on the objects of sense with absorbing interest, I think you know it very well when we go to the malls and the big shops and all that. Half the time, where is our consciousness? In the sensorial consciousness, looking at the objects, looking at this new attraction, new advertisement, new ways. And we go to the malls or the big shop 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, and then you get attached. You have a desire. You get attached to an object. It may be useful or necessary or not in your house, but somewhere your senses, because they've seen it so many times, you get an attachment to that. And then there's no reason that really tells you to have it or not. Why should you have it? Why should you buy it? Because you have that card, what is it called? Swiping card. You don't need cash in your hand for pockets. In the US, you just swipe your card, it's $50 or $500, you don't mind. It's what you desire, you take it. And look at Sri Krishna who says, attachment brings desire. And from desire, anger comes forth. Well, how is it possible desire brings you anger? Obviously, I don't have to explain that. Because desire brings you possessiveness. And once you are possessing that object, anything that happens to that object brings you anger. Either you lose it or somebody touches it, somebody wastes it. So you see, anger comes in. So that's the first thing when Sri Krishna said, desire, wrath, and greed. So this is how he's explaining how to get rid of this. And in the Aurobindonian language, this is nothing but the integral yoga, what we say rejection. You see the similarities? Aspiration of yoga, integral yoga is there. Rejection of integral yoga is there in the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, there are many verses that we can apply here, but I'm just giving you a very scanty view. And then the third one, which all of you know very well, verse 18, verse 65, chapter 18, verse 65. Become my-minded, my lover and adorer, sacrifice to me, bow thyself to me thou shalt come, this is my pledge and promise to thee, for dear art thou to me. You know the famous verse, Manmanabha Madbhakta Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. So this is the third advice. Become my-minded, think of me. And then he says all the time, my lover and adorer. And then it says, a sacrifice to me. That means all the three things that Sri Krishna has spoken of are really contained in that single verse. My mind constantly thinking of you, Jnana Yoga. My lover and adorer, Bhakti Yoga. And my sacrifice to me, Karma Yoga. So that's why this verse was chosen by Sri Aurobindo as one of the most important ones in the Gita. Because it is an experience of a complete triple marga, the success of a triple marga, or the three paths. And this is what I would conclude as the surrender. So we have three aspects: aspiration, rejection, and surrender of the integral yoga is there exactly found in the Bhagavad Gita too. But remember, there's one thing that I would like you to pay attention to. This is verse 65. That is which one? Manmanabha Madbhakti Madhyaji Man Namaskuru is verse 65. But all of us know verse 66. Most of you know what it is. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja. Now please note the sequence of this. It's very important. Some of you may have not noted that. Because the question is, Sarva dharman parityaja, abandon all dharmas. Imagine Sri Krishna telling this before in verse number 64. It would have been quite controversial. That why is this Sri Krishna telling us, after telling me so many things to Arjuna, so many things, you should behave like that, you should act like this, you should be Kshatriya, you should have this kind of a consciousness, you should surrender yourself. And then suddenly says, well, all that I've said has no value. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam. No. That's precisely what I'm saying. The organization of the verses is of ample importance, of great importance. 65 he says, what I said here, become my-minded, manmana bhava madbhakta. So it is only when you become madbhakta, madhyaji, my sacrificer and my lover, only then you can sacrifice, abandon the dharmas. Imagine what a beautiful sequence. I mean, it is not just given per chance. Otherwise, people may just give up all dharmas and say, well, Sri Krishna says, give up all dharmas and do what you want. Or you cannot do that. And then this question of Mamekam Sharanam Braja, you cannot do any time and every time. You have to first of all practice this question of Manmana Bhava Madbhakta. So once you attain that consciousness of Manmana, constantly thinking of him, constantly feeling about him, constantly acting for him, constantly consecrating to him, at that level of consciousness, only at that level of consciousness, you can now abandon, not before. And it's only at that level of consciousness that you can have this question of Mamekam Sharanam Braja. So it is not easy, because some people have misquoted saying, Lord Krishna says it can be Mamekam Sharanam Braja, then you abandon all that. You cannot abandon the moral rules, the spiritual rules, your rules of your society, rules of your nations. You cannot. Until and unless you become that kind of a person. Say we have a beautiful example of Mirabai. She had become that Manmana Bhava Madbhakta Madhya She was constantly thinking of the Lord, constantly thinking of feeling about the Lord, constantly surrendering. At that time, she was ready to abandon. She could leave her husband, she could leave the palace, she could leave everything. But we, in ordinary guys, ordinary people, cannot afford to do that because we are not yet surrendered, we are not yet thinking of the Lord, we are not yet united with that consciousness. This is the three essential parts. And these three essential parts, I've already told you, are very, very similar in the integral yoga too. What is it? Well, as I said, aspiration, rejection, and surrender. Well, you have all read The Mother. I'm sure many people have even lectured on that, given talks on that. Well, many people may be reading The Mother as a daily mantra, or daily prayer. If not daily prayer, at least sometimes you would have read it, because those, especially chapter 6, is definitely an invocation that we can do on Darshan Day, on a special day. And then we have the Mother's Voice also reading out those 4 aspects of the Divine Mother. An extraordinary book. Well, if I start talking about the Mother, you'll see I've given about how many? About 45 talks on that, on chapter 6 alone. So deep is that book. Many people think, "Acha chalta bhai, chapter number 6 pad liya hai." But every word needed 1 hour of talk and 1 hour of explanation. I'm not trying to advertise, but what I want to tell you is that is the depth and intensity. Because remember, The Mother is not a book written by Sri Aurobindo. It's an invocation. It's a descent of the Mother. So he has written as if to say, like we have in the Durga time, we have in Bengal the famous Chandi part. It's an invocation for the descent of the Mother. So this, The Mother, written by Sri Aurobindo, is a kind of an invocation to incarnate that Supreme Mother. However, in chapter 2 of this book, I'll read out just simple definitions which all of you know, but to tell you the comparison between the Bhagavad Gita and Integral Yoga. Sri Aurobindo says the personal effort required is the triple labor of aspiration, rejection, and surrender. I think we often forget what is the meaning of aspiration. It's so simple to say, "Oh, aspire for the divine." Fine. Aspire for the Mother, for the divine consciousness. It's not easy. It's easier said. Look at what Sri Aurobindo says. An aspiration, vigilant, constant, unceasing. The mind's will, the heart's seeking, the ascent of the vital, the will to open and make plastic the physical consciousness and nature. So there's an aspiration on the level of the mind, on the level of the vital, on the level of the physical. It's not just enough to say, "Oh, I'm doing a puja to the Mother, putting agarbattis and flower garlands everywhere." That is more or less an emotional thing, a very superficial, sentimental, emotional thing. But here it says, an aspiration vigilant, constant, and unceasing. Unceasing by the mind, the heart, and the vital being, as well as the physical consciousness. Can we really think of this aspiration on the 4 levels of our being? No, we never think of that. And then next one, rejection. What Lord Krishna had told us about the rejection of these 3 things, desire, wrath, and greed. He says these are the doorways to hell. But look at Sri Aurobindo, he says, rejection of the mind's ideas. I mean, how radical is Sri Aurobindo in this rejection? It is not the superficial, the outer surface of this desire, wrath, and greed. Sri Aurobindo is much more fundamental in rejection, in this purification. What is it? Rejection of the mind's ideas, opinions, preferences, habits, constructions, so that the true knowledge may find free room in a silent mind. Rejection of the vital nature's desires, demands, cravings, sensations, passions, selfishness, pride, arrogance, lust, greed, jealousy, envy, hostility to the truth. Where is synthesis of yoga and where is the Bhagavad Gita? If it's just the question of this detachment and desire and wrath and greed, Shri Krishna takes this rejection far too higher, far too into the depth. So you can see the mind, its opinions, its preferences, there's nothing to say, my idea, I prefer this way, and this is my habit, nothing. Even the vital says desires, demands, cravings, pride, arrogance. And on the larger side, he would say rejection of the physical nature, stupidity, doubt, disbelief, obscurity, obstinacy, pettiness, laziness, unwillingness to change, tamas, so that the true stability of light, power, and ananda may establish itself in a body, growing always more divine. I mean, we can talk at length on all these things, but just I'm trying to bring to your notice that this integral yoga is more fundamental, is more on the root level of our own human being, on the roots of vital being, the roots of mental, of physical consciousness, the roots of vital and mental, where all this tamas, this rajas, all this is settled down as if it is subconscious. So these are not the questions that Sri Krishna would really engage us saying, oh, take out your desire because you're seeing an object many a time, you get an attachment and all that. No. Sri Aurobindo means business. He is really giving us a thorough system of yoga. And this would be why Sri Aurobindo making his yoga so very difficult. You see, to reach Sri Krishna and to conquer what he has said is itself difficult. No doubt about it. But Sri Aurobindo is giving us this kind of somebody has to mute yourself. I think there's a lot of noise. Sri Aurobindo is taking us into these great details. Taking us into these great details because Sri Aurobindo wants to transform the human being. Not just to make the human being a noble creature, a good devotee, a good person. No, it's not the question of saintliness, goodness, or even being the lovely, very good instrument. No. Because Sri Aurobindo has the business of transforming human nature. So for transforming human nature, we have to get rid of this entire lower nature of the mind, the physical and the vital. And then comes the third level, the surrender. In proportion as the surrender and self-consecration progress, the sadhak becomes conscious of the divine Shakti doing the sadhana, pouring into him more and more of herself, founding in him the freedom and perfection of the divine nature. Surrender comes last. But mind you, there's a very important word. Note that a tamasic surrender, refusing to fulfill the conditions and calling on God to do everything and save one all the trouble and struggle, is a deception and does not lead to freedom and perfection. This is a thing that all of us, the disciples of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, are in the habit of making this. What is it? Calling on God to do everything and save one all the trouble and struggle. We think that we are the disciples, we are the children, we are the privileged children of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, so they will do the sadhana of rejection, of aspiration and all that. Sri Aurobindo says, sorry, it is a deception and does not lead to freedom and perfection. What does it imply? It implies that the personal effort cannot be avoided at whatever cost, at whatever stage. You have to have practice personal effort. Without making a personal effort, we cannot even ask and expect the grace to work in us. We have to keep open ourselves, the mind, the physical, the vital, so that the call may be there and the grace acts on you. Well, that is the three things that I wanted to bring to your notice. What will the differences between aspiration, rejection, surrender in the Gita and in integral yoga. Now coming to the next point, which all of us know as the triple path of the Bhagavad Gita. Well, it is easy to say what are the triple paths? Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Well, it is understandable. I mean, put it in a very simple manner. The three steps are I am the doer. So each one of us has an ambition, has a desire, has an ego. And I start off my journey saying, I am the doer. I am doing this work, I am earning this thing, I am the head of the family, I am the minister, I am the director. I am. So Sri Krishna takes into account, yes, we are all doers out of ego, out of desire, out of wanting, out of necessity, whatever it is. That cannot be dismissed. And yet, if we can add this little point, I am the doer, but I am also the person who is offering my actions to the divine, then that is the balance between the ego doing and the offering. So you can turn spiritual, all your action, if you can have this question of offering. Or Sri Aurobindo says self-consecration. So most of us are perhaps, and I hope we are, on this level. We are doing for the outer world, for the family, for the nation, for the society, anything. But if we can add this little sentence, Ma, Sri Aurobindo, Lord Krishna, this is my consecration to thee. So there we are saved. When we go advance in sadhana, there is a question of I am not the doer. There comes in you in your life and consciousness where you say, I am not the doer. There's something else that's acting through me. That's not a mental thing. It's a feeling that comes inside you that how can I be doing all this work that I'm doing? Because at a point of time you disbelieve that you can do all that you are doing. So this disbelief in yourself makes you realize there's something else, someone else, another consciousness which is coming in. That consciousness sometimes is called Prakriti or Shakti or whatever. But at least there is a sense of I am not the doer anymore. Maybe sometimes I am, sometimes I am not. And the Gita would say the third stage is when you say the divine is the worker, the divine is the doer. These are the very three simple steps. But you see the progressive steps in the Gita Yoga. In Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga also there is the same sense. But then you see there's a little difference. In Sri Aurobindo, especially in the book The Synthesis of Yoga, we have 4 parts, as all of you know. The Yoga of Divine Works. But those of you who have read the synthesis very closely, you will see the moment the word the Yoga of Divine Works comes in, oh, we think it's a Karma Yoga. Well, there is a semblance to that. And yet, it's vastly different. It's called the yoga of divine works. Yoga means union. So while you are doing the works, you have got to have a union with the divine within. It's not just doing works and saying, "Oh Lord, this work is for thee." That's fine to begin with. But you must have read these chapters on the ascent of the sacrifice, self-surrender in works, the divine work. Vishwamitra speaks greatly about a psychic being. So the works take you towards your psychic, or not take you, ought to take you. And with the surrender, the attitude of surrender, what comes out is the psychic being. So unlike what we see in the Gita, where work to the Lord, to Purushottama is fine. But Sri Aurobindo takes it another point of view, that works ought to take you towards your own psychic surrender. That's a new way of looking at things, not given in the Bhagavad Gita. And then the second one, the yoga of integral knowledge. He doesn't say yoga of knowledge, he uses the word integral knowledge. And he has such great discussions on concentration and renunciation, realization of cosmic self, planes of our existence. It's way beyond what the Gita has explained, because Sri Aurobindo has a tremendously large canvas. That's the entire human being, the planes of consciousness, the cosmic existence, what is concentration. I mean, you have seen the number of chapters that are there. So Sri Aurobindo seems to be giving us something vastly different, very deep. And then once you see the difference, Sri Krishna seems to be dealing with psychological explanation, psychological angle, and also with the kind of what we say in modern psychology, behavioral temperament of the human being. Of course, he does connect the external, outer behavior with the inner being, the truths of the soul, the truths of the Purusha Prakriti, two kinds of Akshara Purusha, Purusha and Purushottam. All that is fine. But Sri Aurobindo has given us something more vastly different and very deep. And then the third one, the yoga of divine love. You see, it's not the question of loving the divine. It's not just the question of bhakti. It's not the question of prayers. I mean, you must read his prayers. I mean, of course, you have read it, I know that. But chapters like Ananda Brahman, the mystery of love, the way of devotion. I mean, he goes to the essence of what is the root meaning of devotion. Why devotion? How does it differ? What are the levels of devotion? Because we think devotion is only pujari, do the puja. No, not at all. It's just the beginning. The outer puja is just the beginning. It's the most simple alphabets of puja, of devotion. How you have to get into a self-consecration, how you have to get into that kind of a absolute, surrender and giving oneself consecration. Does our love, bhakti, lead us to consecration? Ask yourselves. Or is it just a question of, a ritual, a routine ritual? Well, these chapters like Ananda Brahman, etc., are supremely beautiful. I mean, they really take you to a psychic level, all these chapters. So what I see, you see, the note that runs to the psychic, it's the synthesis of yoga, and that runs to the Bhagavad Gita, are two different notes altogether, although they may be apparently dealing with the same themes. But in one, Lord Krishna seems to be the divine teacher who is answering the questions of Arjuna. Which is better, the meditation or the karma, or what is sukarma, what is vikarma? It's a clarification of the mind. But Sri Aurobindo speaks of the perfection of the mind, perfection of the levels of the mind. So his Sri Aurobindo's analysis is, as I'm telling you again and again, deeper, wider, vaster, which could not have been covered by the short 700 verses in the Bhagavad Gita. And then the last section, which all of you know, the yoga of self-perfection. This is where lies the entire difference between the Bhagavad Gita and integral yoga. Sri Krishna has covered whatever little manner he could, the divine works, integral knowledge, the divine love. But he doesn't touch upon this self-perfection, yoga of self-perfection. Because integral yoga is nothing but yoga of integral perfection. Synthesis of yoga, nothing but self-perfection. So perfection is the hallmark of integral yoga. And Sri Krishna doesn't speak about this perfection. He speaks about becoming the, working for the community, working for the nation, working for humanity, and surrendering oneself to the divine, etc., etc. But Sri Aurobindo stands and falls only by the word perfection. With perfection, you got so many chapters to say perfection of the mental being, the power of the instrument, the nature of the superman, the gradations of the superman. So there he really goes off into his own yoga, integral yoga. Because till now there could be some parallelism between Bhagavad Gita and integral yoga, but in the fourth section there is no parallelism. Because there's a question of the supermind, the gradations of the supermind, etc. Well, with that, I come to that's where is the beginning of the differences between Bhagavad Gita and integral yoga. As I said, first one is already the notion, concept of perfection. Then I take you the differences. The very first difference that we notice in the very first Mahavakya I quoted earlier, what we said, Mamekam Sharanam Raja, and what we said about the integral yoga, Mother Sri Aurobindo is my refuge. In the Bhagavad Gita, all that we say is constantly the question of surrendering to me. He says, become my minded, my lover, a sacrificer to me. Bow thyself to me. To me thou shalt come, for dear art thou to me. Who is this me constantly speaking about? It is Sri Krishna himself as the avatar, or the world teacher, or he may be the Purushottama that he is speaking about. You see, it's a very important thing to discriminate. There's so many times Sri Krishna says me and myself and I and all that. But he is not Sri Krishna in all of them. Sometimes he is the Purushottama speaking, sometimes he is the cosmic self who is speaking, sometimes he is the avatar who is speaking, sometimes he is the friend who is speaking. So we have to find out the different gradations of the me. And here when it says that Mamekam Sharanam Raja, to me thou shalt come, this me is the Purushottama. But when the mother writes, Mother Sri Aurobindo is my refuge. So there begins the question of the differentiation about the question of the me, the mother. So here the offering itself is done not to Purushottama, but to the mother. Of course, the mother says, Mother Sri Aurobindo is, both of them are together, it's one consciousness. But then it's essentially, as Sri Aurobindo has told us many a time, we have to make our offering to the mother. Because through the mother that Sri Aurobindo is to be approached. And you see how the mother takes us up, and it's so much more warm, if I can say. You see, when Sri Krishna says, thou art dear to me, there's a feeling of an elation. that I am close to the Lord. That Sri Krishna says I am close to Him, that I should surrender to Him. But there is a subtle difference here, where the Lord is saying, "You are close to me." Here the mother is telling, "I am your mother." You see, the personal note already coming in. I am your mother, who will give birth in you to the true being, the being who is free, peaceful, strong, and happy always, independently of all circumstances. You see the tonality of the voice of the message? The mother is taking the full responsibility. And it says, I am yours. Then it says, I carry you in my arms, pressed close to my heart, and I have no doubt that you will become aware of it if you forget the world and concentrate on me. You see the mother's beautiful thing? She says, I'll give you birth, who will give birth in you of the true being. So she's already promising you the birth of your own psychic being. So I will give you that. This is my gift to my children, that if you are concentrating on me, I'll give you the gift of your own psychic being, which is never promised by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, saying, I'll give you your own Atman. Lord Krishna is telling me all the time, dear art thou to me. Of course, dear art itself means a lot of this equality, this question of non-attachment and all that. These are qualities. But here you see a different layer of quality. Mother says, I will give birth to your own psychic being. Then at one point she says, I am with you because I am you or you are me. You see the absolute identity. This is very close to what Sri Krishna says to Arjuna. Your mother is telling us that I am you or you are me. Then I found another little significance where the mother is explaining, I am with you. That signifies a world of things. Because I am with you on all levels, on all planes, from the supreme consciousness down to my most physical consciousness. I mean, you see, things have changed. It is no more the Lord Krishna, the Purushottama, who is telling the humanity, who is telling Arjuna that you are close to me, I'll help you, I'll give you shelter. It is not a promise. Sri Krishna is giving you a promise, but the mother is saying, I am you. And she says that I am with you on all levels. That means your physical level, psychological level, mental level, vital level, because I am you. You see the perfect identity, the closeness between the disciple and the mother. And then there's another beautiful line where it says, there's a special personal tie between you and me, between all who have turned to the teaching of Sri Aurobindo and myself. Sri Krishna is telling to Arjuna that those who are dear to me, to them I will do that. But the mother is telling us in a larger, more universal, more cosmic manner that all those who have turned to the teaching of Sri Aurobindo and the mother have a special tie, personal tie with all of you. And it is well understood, distance does not count here. You may be in France, and I'm adding you may be in New Jersey. You may be at the other end of the world or in Pondicherry. This tie is always true and living. And each time there comes a call, each time there's a need for me to know, so that I may send out a force and an inspiration, a protection or any other thing. A sort of message comes to me all of a sudden, and I do the needful. There's one very beautiful explanation which I would like you to understand. It is often a question asked by many disciples. With those whom I have accepted as disciples, with those whom I have accepted as disciples, to whom I have said yes, there's more than a tie. There's an emanation of me. So previously she said, those who have turned to the teaching of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, there's a personal tie. But then she says further, those whom I have accepted as disciples, there's more than a tie, there's an emanation of me. This emanation warns me whenever it is necessary and tells me what is happening. Indeed, I receive intimations constantly, but not all are recorded in my active memory. I would be flooded. The physical consciousness acts like a filter. Things are recorded on a subtle plane, they are there in a latent state, something like a piece of music that is recorded without being played. And when I need to know with my physical consciousness, I make contact with this subtle physical plane and the disk begins to turn. Well, in your contemporary age of computers, you should be able to understand that easily. The things are left in the cloud. A file is left in the cloud, preserved in the cloud, and when you want to have that cloud, the file, you bring it back. So that is what the mother is saying, that in her subtle physical consciousness, everything is recorded. But when she wants to have a file, she pulls it, makes it more active. Then I see how things are, their development in time, the actual result. And then last thing, this exactly reminds us of Lord Krishna again. In truth, I hold myself responsible for everyone, even for those whom I have met only for 1 second in my life. Of course, these are very exceptional people, but yet those who have turned to the mother have the same privilege. If you have turned to the mother, and then she says, if you called me once sincerely, I'm responsible for all of you, for all your lives. But that call has to be sincere. One, even if you call her once, oh ma, I'm dying, I want to be yours. Let there be the psychic call, and you've done it. Well, that was the first major difference between the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, and Sri Aurobindo's Integral Yoga. The aspect of the mother. Then you have the question of the mother, and not the mother. There's another concept which is lacking in the Bhagavad Gita. The individual versus collective perfection. We're talking about perfection. So Gita may speak about individual perfection. How Arjuna can become a Loka Sangraha for work for the welfare of the society, for the common people. But Sri Aurobindo looks for the collective perfection. He is not happy just with the local perfection, with the individual perfection. So there is the question of individual versus the humanity, the collectivity. That's one of the other major differences between Bhagavad Gita and Sri Aurobindo. But then there is another very important one, is the concept of evolution is missing in the Bhagavad Gita. And the concept of evolution is a central piece of Sri Aurobindo's yoga and philosophy. Because Bhagavad Gita may tell us is all a leela of the divine, it's a maya of the divine. But Sri Aurobindo says, no, the world is not a leela or a maya of the divine. It's continuously evolving towards the image of the divine. So whatever way it is there now is imperfect, bad, ugly and all that, it's still not the maya. Because in this concept of maya and leela, Sri Aurobindo argues that this makes it a static world. That we are eternally into this maya. We are suffering, we are happy, but this is a staticity about it. But Sri Aurobindo's concept always tells us there is an evolution. That's another major thing. And then we have, of course, the question of triple transformation. Of course, as I have already indicated, the psychicization, spiritualization, supramentalization. It was not there because it could not have been there. I must add that. But that was the time when this question of supramentalization, transformation was not there. And of course, levels beyond mind, what Sri Aurobindo describes the higher mind, intuitive mind, element mind, etc. That was not there at all. But then why are we discussing about these things? What was not there? Definitely it was not there because there was not time for these things to be revealed by the Lord. So in fact, this brings us to the question of the evolution of the avatars. And in this question, we all know that all the avatars represent a certain evolutionary stage of human consciousness. So there's no question of greater or lesser avatar, but each avatar fulfilling his own mission, his own work, in order to take humanity to a higher step in evolution. And here comes the last section that I was dealing with, the oneness and identity between Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo. In the same explanation of the avatars, I'm reading out something from Amal Kiran, K.D. Setna. I venture to suggest he, that Sri Aurobindo, could disclose Sri Krishna's ultimate status, because it's Sri Aurobindo who told us that Sri Krishna represents the overmental consciousness, the Ananda aspect of the divine. So how could Sri Aurobindo tell that he represents the whole mind? You see, Sri Rama could not have said what Sri Krishna represented. But here we see Sri Aurobindo tells very clearly that Sri Ram represents the ideal mind, the sattvic mind, and Sri Krishna represents the over mind. How did he say that? There's only somebody who goes beyond the over mind who can tell about what is below. So the status of an Uttama Purusha beyond either the Kshara or the Akshara Purusha, that is of the Purushottama. The existence of Purushottama was part not only of Sri Aurobindo's philosophical knowledge but also of his own experience. So it is understood that the Purushottama status of consciousness was part of Sri Aurobindo's own consciousness. That means not part in sense, not a piece. But Sri Aurobindo himself was in that Purushottama consciousness, so he knew who Sri Krishna is, from what level he has come, and who Sri Aurobindo is, from what level he has come. Because, as I said, both he and Sri Krishna were Purushottama incarnate. Make a concentrate on this. Both he and Sri Krishna were Purushottama incarnate. Who? Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo were Purushottama incarnate. What do we say by this Purushottama incarnate? That means they are both avatars of Purushottama. Sri Aurobindo writes in one of his letters that in this adventure of the evolution of the avatars, that the evolution went in the right manner from level to level up until the times of Sri Krishna. Then comes the Buddha. Then it goes off on a tangent. It doesn't go from level to level of consciousness. There's a tangent path that is taken off. That is with the Buddha, there's a different level. It goes to Nirvana. But after Sri Krishna, logically, comes Sri Krishna, Sri Aurobindo. Whereas after overmind comes supermind. So our K.D. Setna is telling us the existence of Purushottama was part not only of Sri Aurobindo's philosophical knowledge but also of his own experience. Both he and Sri Krishna were Purushottama incarnate, the latter using in consonance with the need of the time what Sri Aurobindo has called the overmind, the highest cosmic consciousness, as his instrument of manifestation, while former used the supermind, the transcendent creative truth consciousness, whose hour in spiritual history has struck now. So it is very clear that Sri Aurobindo comes at this hour using the supermind as his instrument, as his manifesting consciousness. But there is one striking sentence that I would like all of us to understand. This is from Amal Kiran, who says, Sri Aurobindo was himself Sri Krishna in a past birth. That is something that's revealing. Sri Aurobindo himself was Sri Krishna in a past birth. And believe it or not, it is Kamal Kiran himself who has known many a past lives of Sri Aurobindo here, who had the courage and the guts to ask Sri Aurobindo what he was in his previous birth. Sri Aurobindo might not have said so dramatically that I was Sri Krishna in the past birth. But look at all the relationship that we have, right from the days of the Alipur jail, the guidance, the philosopher, the guide, everything that Sri Krishna was for Sri Aurobindo. And again, why Sri Krishna comes and merges himself with Sri Aurobindo is only to say that I'm with you, go on to the next level of supermind. So this seems to be definitely an innate and inner and a past birth connection. So that is why Amal Kiran comes out to say that Sri Aurobindo that was himself Sri Krishna in a past birth. So that logically now comes together why Bhagavad Gita was exceeded by the integral yoga that is given in Synthesis of Yoga. Because he is himself writing about his own past birth. And that is why Sri Aurobindo has written in different places in different ways that it is Sri Krishna's work that is being continued in the ashram. And then he says, whatever you offer to Sri Krishna, it comes to me and then it goes to the divine. So that's oneness of consciousness. Like we see the oneness of consciousness between Sri Aurobindo and the mother. Similar is the oneness of consciousness between Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo. So that is why Sri Krishna's work continues. And that is why the first word, the last word of Bhagavad Gita is Mahamekam Sharanam Raja, surrender. And the first word of Integral Yoga is surrender. So it's a kind of a continuation of the Gita that comes into Synthesis of Yoga, and then Sri Aurobindo takes it forward to another level of the supermind. So there is, as I started saying, a similarity between the Bhagavad Gita and the Synthesis. And yet Sri Aurobindo goes far beyond the Bhagavad Gita, both by content and consciousness. We, those of us who have read, we can easily understand. It's not the question of comparing and contrasting. What we have ended up with saying, it is Sri Krishna who became Sri Aurobindo. It is Sri Aurobindo who was Sri Krishna in his past birth. And that is why when a Gujarati poet says that you are Sri Aurobindo, you are Govinda and you are Aravinda. Tu ya Arvinda, tu ya Govinda. Sri Aurobindo says yes. So how many times do we hear that Sri Krishna, Sri Aurobindo saying, we are the same, there is no difference. In fact, Sri Aurobindo himself has uttered, there is no difference between me and Sri Aurobindo and Sri Krishna. This is the oneness. This is the necessary difference. Difference is not because Sri Aurobindo is higher or no, because Sri Aurobindo has come in a new yuga after thousands of years, carrying the same consciousness and making it forward, that we see the differences. Otherwise, let's not think higher or lower. No. It's a one consciousness taken once again a birth of Sri Aurobindo gone forward. So now, friends, I hope I brought you some major differences and similarities. But I get very excited to speak about these differences because I realize the oneness of this Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo. And then the more we see, then we apply it to the relationship in the way Sri Krishna came in Alipur jail. So personally says, I have brought you to the prison to take you to a new world, a new course, new work. You see, that I-ness of Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo's life is immense. So friends, I think we have not exceeded my time.
No.
I could have spoken, but I think for us it's 8:45 here, but for you maybe it's still not yet the brunch time.
It's 11:50.
So you could go on listening to me, but you have to give me time. Next time we'll change our timing maybe.
Sure.
But
Yes.
wonderful. As somebody told me this morning, yesterday, he said, Anand bhai, you are tremendously passionate about Sri Aurobindo. Yes, that's the right word. I cannot take his name without my heart's passion and my mind's dedication. I adore Sri Aurobindo and Sri Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anandji. I think, bringing our own emotion to this beautiful talk is I will not be able to do justice what we are hearing, how we are taking things one after other, and it really simply begs the question that there are so many other aspects during this talk which has came out, which all of us or many of us have questioned, and which can be a separate talk on its own. But nonetheless, at this time, if anybody else wants to ask any question, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, I have one question. Hi, this is Govind. Namaskaram, or rather than good evening, namaskar. uh, can you please share that quote again from the mother about her revealing the true being to us? The quote that you had shared from the mother.
Which one?
About mother saying that she will reveal the true being, for you. Like if you forget the word, concentrate on her, the true being, essentially, the true being.
Yeah, she says, I am your true mother who will give birth in you to the true being.
Okay.
The being who is free, peaceful, strong, and happy always, independently of all circumstances. Then the second one, she says, I carry you always in my arms, pressed close to my heart, and I have no doubt that you will become aware of it if you forget the world and concentrate on me. By turning your thoughts towards me, you will feel closer and closer to me, and peace will come to dwell in your heart. Remember what she says, very close to Shri Krishna, Manmana bhava madbhakta madhyaji. So the whole question of mind, live in me, think of me, concentrate on me, and then you'll have the psychic being and I'm with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Anyone else wants to ask any question?
Oh, Meera Natkar.
Okay. So there's a
Meera, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Happy to see you after a long time.
Here talk, yeah.
Oh my God, you're also there.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I
Yeah.
love talk, yeah. Loved it.
Yeah. You may be remembering Father Natkaniji.
Yes.
Yeah, we are all great friends, really. Missing
Yeah.
you. How are you, Meera ji?
I'm fine.
Lovely.
He's
Good
doing
to
my
see you.
yeah.
Hello,
Right.
Meera Didi. Hello, Meera Didi.